My name is Ron Carrico. I'm with the San Diego Air and Space Museum, and today we're with Woody Spring, his astronaut to start off with, and more specifically a mission specialist on a TS, which stands for Space Transport System.
Transportation System.
Transportation System, 61B.
Right.
And well, let's talk a little bit about how you got there, and then what you did, and the gee whiz fun stuff of it.
Sure.
So first of all, where were you born?
I was born in Hartford, Connecticut, raised in Rhode Island. So I was from a small town USA, New England style. My folks had it was school for emotionally disturbed, mentally retarded kids. It was basically an old farm, an old homestead. In fact, we had a 3-story hand-pegged chestnut barn that's now in a museum.
Oh, yeah.
The place was gorgeous, you know, back in the old days. You can see the earthen dams where they had the undershoots, water mills and stuff like that for it. It's a gorgeous little area. It's the land that time forgot.
Yeah.
And so that's where I kind of grew up, you know, in the sticks of Rhode Island. And although I love the area, West Point was my escape. I just knew I wanted to paint my life on a little bit bigger landscape than I had available in Podunk, Rhode Island.
So you picked West Point as opposed to Naval or Air Force Academy, but you wanted to be a pilot all along, is that correct?
Pretty much. I picked the one that selected me, that allowed me to go there. I applied to Annapolis as well as West Point. And Annapolis gave me an alternate, and West Point gave me a position, so I took the bird in hand.
When did you graduate from West Point?
1967.
And so after that, what did you do?
Well, that was the peak of the Vietnam War, so I had a month's vacation, then airborne school, ranger school, basic course, advanced course, then right over to Vietnam for my first tour.
Where were you stationed?
I was up in the I Corps area with the 101st Airborne Division, up in the Way Phu Bai area, mostly on fire bases.
Okay. And then you came home, and then after that you...
Well, while I was over there on that particular tour, I applied for flight school, took the physical while I was in Vietnam, so I passed it. Came back to flight school, and it was just almost another year of flight school, you know, basic training, and then advanced helicopter, and then I was high in the class, so I got Chinooks, which is the one we're still flying, the big old tandem rotor cargo aircraft. Special Forces uses it too. And
now, was it just regular pilot training now? Is it Air Force pilot training?
No, it's a helicopter training very specifically.
By the Army?
By the Army.
Okay.
Now the Army does helicopter training for the Air Force and the Army, but back then, maybe we did back then too. I think the Air Force had their own schools.
So I saw the model of the T-38 upstairs. Where did you fly that?
Later on, after my second tour in Vietnam, I really wanted to stay a pilot, which is difficult in the Army because we have flying warrant officers. So to stay a pilot, I needed to become a test pilot, which is really the only viable way to stay a pilot in the Army.
And so how did you become a test pilot?
Well, I applied for it and got picked up for the program, and then I got a master's in aerospace engineering to go to Patuxent River, which is where the Army does its test pilot training. You have to be fixed wing qualified too. So then I had to go to the fixed wing transition, which is where I then got, you know, fixed wing and fly different things, and I had to get up to, I think it's 400 hours of fixed wing time. You needed 1,100 hours total, but at least 400 hours in whatever your lesser aircraft was, helicopter or fixed wing. Mm-hmm. So I got a chance to just keep flying fixed wing all over the place, and finally I had enough hours to go to PAX.
And what kind of airplanes were you flying there?
At PAX River or at the test pilot?
Yeah.
PAX
River first, and then test pilot school.
Okay. Well, PAX is the test pilot school.
Oh, okay.
I went to Edwards to get most of my flight time. So I was flying the Mohawk, the OV-1. That's a triple tail, twin Huey engines, you know, so twin 1,100 power turboshaft engines. Mm-hmm. Really a nice performing aircraft. The T-28 we talked about earlier, mm-hmm. Big old 2,800 horsepower radial engine, 2-stage turbocharger. Oh, hurt me. I mean, just what a fun thing to do is get lots of time in that thing. At PAX River, you fly a little bit everything. So I was flying the T-2 Buckeye, which is a training aircraft. They had the Mohawk. They had B-24 Liberator, or B-26 rather, variable stability aircraft. Lots of different. They had one that was specially designed to let them make it fly like a fighter or like a bomber, not for long. Because, you know, if it's not a fighter, it's still a light bomber.
That was a computer program.
It was a computer program that changes how fast the responses went.
Yeah,
and after they crashed, when they had to go to a pure jet to do that training.
Yeah, a friend of mine was involved in that. John Ball was his name.
I know John. I met John.
Is that right?
Yeah, way back when. Yeah, he was. I think he was one of the pilots on it.
I think so, yeah. He was from Connecticut or somewhere, I believe. He's
Yeah.
up the Northeast.
Yeah, they'd fly in with that thing, and would be scheduled for that hop, and you'd go. I think John was the guy I flew with.
Yeah,
Yeah,
John
so-
was we were in the 10th TAC Fighter Squadron and the 8th TAC Fighter Squadron together.
Okay, the whole test pilot school thing was just fascinating, and the folks you're meeting. I remember the first couple of days there. You're just, so where are you from? What did you do and stuff like that? And one of the guys sitting over in the corner. So how many hours you got? What did you fly? I flew. I think it was the F4. How many hours you got? I only got 400 hours. What are you doing here? You need 1,100 hours. He says, well, I'm an Israeli pilot, and it was all afterburner time. And my photography, during the Arab-Israeli war, and my hobby is photography. I'm a 17-time ace or whatever the hell it is. He says, never mind. Sorry about the questions. Just telling the war stories. Just so much fun.
You were in test pilot school, and
then 4 years as a test pilot at Edwards Air Force Base. The Army used to have its engineering flight test facility at Edwards.
Okay, so what years would that be?
That would be from about 74 through 80 is when I was there.
Okay. And did you live you lived at the base?
I lived on base.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was there twice, really. Once for 6 months to finish up all the time I needed in fixed wing.
Right.
Then a year at PAX and right back to Edwards to my 4-year utilization tour.
So then how did you get into the astronaut program?
Well, after 4 years as a test pilot, it was time to find another job. Army wanted to re-green me, is what they do. Remember, you're in the Army, so I got to spend a year in Korea. And I was in Korea, but I applied for the astronaut program in '78, which is when they first opened it up to the astronaut for the shuttle program.
Now they had, as I recall, they had the first class, the second class, the third class.
Right, I was the second class. First class was for class of '78.
Okay.
And they picked up 35 folks, including there's 4 women. And then I was the class of '80, which is the one after that. So
Right.
the first Army guy, Army, no kidding, Army, not there. We've had other West Pointers go before, but this is the first Army guy who was in the class of '78.
Well, a lot of the West Pointers would have been guys who were early on when they didn't have
Yeah, Frank Borman, Ed White, we had a bunch of them.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, Buzz Aldrin, there were a lot of West Pointers, but none
Bill
Army.
Anders. Bill Anders.
I'm actually the first Army West Pointer.
Real Army.
Yeah, actual Army and actual West Point. West Point that stayed in the Army instead of went Air Force.
So the astronaut class you got into, does it have a designation?
Yeah, it was class of 1980.
Okay.
Yeah, so we didn't, yeah.
How many people are in it?
19.
And then what do you study?
Well, when you first become an astronaut, for the first year you're an astronaut candidate. That just means if for some reason you don't work out, NASA can say thank you very much, but would like to go ahead and proceed without your company. It hasn't happened that I know of, but it could. So the first year you're kind of on probation, and you're given a job, a full-time job part-time job that you do along with learning the shuttle. So you start off on the shuttle training, you start off on a single system training. For sure, you read a lot of documentation on it. You're going to learn about the OHMS RCS. You're going to learn about the hydraulic system. You're going to learn about whatever. So you read about the article, the system, and then you go on a single system trainer, usually a laptop or a little regular tower computer, and then you do interactive things with it, what it does and what the switches look like and things like that, in a little mock-up of the shuttle. And then you'll go into the multi-systems where 2 or 3 will be linked. And then once you've got those down, then you move into the motion-based simulators where you become part of a team, part of a crew.
Where was this? Where was this?
Oh, this is all at Johnson Space Center.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where the astronauts live, even though we launched from Kennedy Space Center. President Johnson was from Texas. Where should we put the next NASA center? With President Johnson, there was going to be Texas, one place or the other.
You mean there was politics involved?
No. He did it out of altruism. Right, for Texas, though.
Probably the same thing for why they probably launched out of JFK.
Yeah, it could be. Well, they named it JFK because of that. Cape Canaveral was the eastern test range.
So, now what was your official job at that point?
Okay, my official job started off, I was working the Shuttle Avionics Integration Lab, SAIL. So I was doing regression software testing.
Okay, you better explain what you said. SAIL stands for?
Shuttle Avionics Integration Lab.
And so then you did regressive training.
Regression testing on the software. As you know, the shuttle is a software system. I mean, you wiggle a stick, you do anything. Very few switches are connected directly to what they're supposed to activate. The switch talks to the computer tells things to go on. That's why they can telemetry up all kinds of reconfiguration changes while you're asleep. You know, you leave the switches where they are, and at night they can reconfigure the shuttle, and then tell you in the morning sometimes switches you have to change the position on them. But you know, that lets them do that. The fact that, you know, there's a computer interface for it.
Yeah.
So as we do patches or do new software releases, then you have to go back and make sure that the fix actually works, and that you haven't unintentionally messed up something else. So we ran the sale 24/7, you know, 7 days a week, 24 hours, and you know, you never, you know, usually you'd work for 1 week on the, you know, the dead man shift, you know, the 3 in the morning till 8 in the morning type of thing, or else whatever.
So you were on. I noticed that the designation was 61B, and there was an A and a B and a C.
Right.
So which number of shuttle would you have been on?
I was 23. Yeah. The reasons for that new designation, which only took place just one flight before me, is we were getting ready to launch out of Vandenberg as well for the first kind of polar orbit. And so NASA headquarters came up with this new scheme. Instead of, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 was the fiscal year. Even though it was calendar year 1985 I launched, it was fiscal year 86. So that's the 6. 1 is the launch site, which is Kennedy. 2 would be Vandenberg, and B was the second flight of that year. We hated it. You know, nobody understood what you were going on unless you went through that complete discussion on it. So after the Challenger accident, which was C, then we went back to
61C was before you launched then.
No, it was after. 6 weeks after I flew, then the Challenger accident took place, and there was another flight in between them. But then they went back to, so that was that was STS 25.
So it had nothing. It had really nothing to do with what you were doing. No. Okay.
Other than just the launch spot,
Oh,
the launch
okay.
location.
So 61 or 6 is the year. 1 is the.
1 is the first. 1 is the launch site. Yeah, 6 is the fiscal year. 1 is the launch site. 1 is Kennedy Space Center. The 2 would be Vandenberg.
Right.
And then the ABC would be which number or which sequence it flew in that year. Of course, then if you have something delayed and something slides in it, you'd fly C before you flew B.
Okay, and you were on Atlantis, right?
I was on Atlantis, the second flight of Atlantis, and NASA's second night launch.
And where is Atlantis now?
Atlantis is up in a, it's on a pedestal at the Kennedy Space Center.
Okay, cool.
Oh, they do a beautiful job of presenting it. Yeah, I took the family there for Christmas.
Oh yeah.
And just before Christmas, and yeah, you go through this thing. They show you a 3D movie about it and developing the shuttle and stuff like that. And then they said, well, let's go see the real thing. And the curtain you've been watching the movie on, all of a sudden when they turned the backlights on, you can just see this like a silhouette of the shuttle. Then they draw the curtains aside, and there's the shuttle kind of tilted towards you,
yeah.
with the payload bays open, and you know, one remote arm is out and the other remote arm is just still stowed.
So did you? Well, they couldn't get. You wouldn't get in it then, obviously. No. Because I saw the shuttle back at Dulles at.
That was the Enterprise way back when, unless you saw it recently.
Recently, yeah.
Yeah, okay, then that would be, I think, the Endeavor.
I think it is.
Endeavor's up in L.A. Discovery. We only got so
It was
many.
white.
Have to be Discovery, yeah.
And,
Yeah, because the Enterprise now is in New York
big.
City.
They're really big.
Oh yeah, it's a huge aircraft.
Yeah, yeah. And the payload was what? 90?
Payload bay is 15 feet wide and 60 feet long.
And total capacity weight you could carry?
Oh, I don't remember the exact numbers on that.
100,000 pounds. Wasn't
Quite a
it?
bit, yeah. It was a space truck. It really was.
I was seeing an interview, I think it was with one of the astronauts, one of the Apollo guys, said, man, if they would have used a Saturn, they could have put that whole damn space.
If I knew you were going to quiz me, I'd go have a cheat sheet or just go get some of the buzz numbers ready again. It's been a while.
No, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I just had my 30-year reunion, so I've been some tidbits you forget over 30.
Well, it seems so recent, you know.
I know.
And the fact that they're not using it anymore, that's probably...
Oh, that's sad. I mean, I do a lot of elementary school, middle school, high school talks still.
What more could they have learned?
It wasn't about learning. That was a space truck for us. But what it was wonderful for is, as you talk to kids, hey, we had an astronaut office of like 120 people. With a conga line, we're flying, 5 people, 6 people at a time. 5 or 6. My year, we had 11 launches. That's a heck of a lot of people. You go through 50, 60 people in a year that should launch. And theoretically, it'd launch every 18 months. But hey, if you kids want to, want to be astronauts, we're still looking for astronauts. We're still having selections, but now we're picking up 5 at a time instead of 20 and 30.
Well, so now the guys that fly it, and the 2 guys in the front, I guess, what do they call them?
The pilot and commander.
Pilot and commander, is that
Right.
the same person then, or?
Well, it could be. I mean, you fly one flight as the pilot, and then at least one flight. You might fly 2 or 3, and then eventually you move into the commander's position.
Right.
And so the commander's got overall charge of the mission. And then the other category is mission specialist, which was what I was.
And so on your flight there were 5 people?
7.
7.
5 astronauts and 2 payload specialists, which are non-astronaut folks that also fly.
What do the payload specialists do?
Well, one was a Mexican national, Rodolfo Nerivela, and we flew him
Right.
because we had the payload launch capability, and we were flying one of his national satellites. Our first satellite we launched was Morelos, which was for Mexico.
So launching it means,
Well, we put the shuttle in the right attitude, you throw the right switches, get the thing go, do a health check, and then at the right time you eject it out. It's spin stabilized, so we spin it up in the payload bay, 50 RPM, and then when everything is just
you mean
right,
just stand in there and get it spinning yourself?
yeah, a little turntable. No, I don't. I'm inside. You don't go outside to launch that one.
Right.
Yeah, so it's there's 3 little pavilions inside
Right.
that have sun shields on them, and you peel the sun shield back automatically with motors, and then you start checking out the satellite itself, and then as you're ready to go, you spin it up to 50 RPM, continue doing the checking, and the shuttle goes to the right attitude, and then you release it, and it just it's ejected out with some spring force, but it's in the right attitude to go to deep space. Then 45 minutes later, on the other side of the Earth, because we go around the Earth every 93 minutes,
Right.
on the other side of the Earth it'll ignite and go out to its geosynchronous orbit. So we
And the
launched
geosynchronous orbit is how far out?
2,300 miles, 2,300 miles out,
Are all the geosynchronous orbits the same distance out?
just about. I mean, the perfect 2,300 miles is pretty well filled up now, so we'll go slightly less than that, so they go up and down a little bit depending on what you put them into.
Now there's a thing called Lagrange points.
The Lagrange, yeah, that's a 0, theoretically a 0 G point.
Yeah, we use that for anything?
Not yet. Theoretically, if we picked up space junk or something like that, you could go to a 0 gravity point, but it's way out.
Oh, it is?
It's pretty far out. I don't know the exact numbers on it.
There's different points. There's up laterally and on
Right,
the other
well,
side of
it's
sun.
when the gravity between the moon pulling you in and the Earth pulling you in is about equal, and the sun too, so that's just a Lagrange
The
0.
picture I saw looked like they were like 12 and 3, or 9 and 3 from us.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
Depends on where the moon is and the sun is and all that kind of good
Now,
stuff.
one of the pictures I saw of you was launching a little small satellite. What was that thing?
That's a target satellite. That was my 4th satellite. one of the flight objectives. Every flight, you got your basic payload, then you got your secondary payload. For us, that was the EVAs that we did, the Tinker Toys in Space, the time and motion studies, and then another
That was
thing.
just to see how fast you could put things together.
Yeah, and it was also get ready. What we kind of knew that free floating in space was dumb, but one of them had us free floating. One of the guys free floating in space, putting nodes and struts together. But it's a time and motion study from what you do in the water
free
tank.
floating thing, because I remember seeing, it was at Buzz Aldrin, somebody saying when they went out into space the first time and they tried to use tools, they forgot about if you tried to turn the tool, you were going to go instead of it moving.
Yeah.
And how did they not figure that one out beforehand?
Well, we kind of sort of knew it, but what we were able to do, the time and motion part of it, is we took stereo imagery in the water. The beams we did on this particular experiment were 10 feet long, 6-inch diameter. They weighed 80 pounds apiece. So you'd pick them up in the water and move them around and put them in position and move them. And then in space we did the same thing. Just do the choreography, both underwater and then in space. And now we've got a good correlation between what works in the water tank and that works in space.
Now in the water tank, of course, you still have gravity. You're in your spacesuit, but you're still affected by gravity in space.
True, but they buoy you out to be neutrally buoyant. So you get.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, you wear a used spacesuit that's got pockets in the front, in the back, in the legs, and in the arms, and
Right.
they'll weigh you out so you're neutrally buoyant. You don't. If they let you go, you don't sink or float, and you also don't go sunny side up or sunny side down, head up or head down. So it's a nice buoy out job.
Yeah.
And then the things you're moving around, they're also pretty well neutrally buoyant. And the aspect ratio is such that moving them through the water isn't that big a deal. And so we built those entire things. I mean, we had a 25-foot tank at Johnson Space Center, and we could go to Marshall Space Flight Center and get a 65-foot tank. And we came back from our flight, said, if you guys want to build space station properly and not screw it up, you need a tank that's big enough to hold the space station and the shuttle. And they built it.
Really?
Yes, I don't remember the exact dimensions, but it's like 150 foot deep, which means it's a decompression dive to go to the bottom of that thing and work.
Wow.
And for us, we did actually, 4-hour tank runs before our mission, because our first EVA, extravehicular activity, our first EVA was 5.5 hours.
Okay,
the second one was 6.5.
So and you did 4, right?
No, two spacewalks.
For a total of 10 or 12 hours?
12 hours.
12 hours, wow.
Yeah.
So let's just talk about the gee whiz part. What's it like?
It's almost incrementally, I had only one flight, so the first flight was just incremental, what's your favorite part? Well, each one was the favorite part I had right there. First of all, it's getting in, knowing you're getting ready to launch. Finally, it's launching. Launch from flat on your back at Kennedy Space Center to on orbit takes 8.5 minutes. Wow, what a ride. And through that, the first part is kind of a violent ride until you get to SRB SEP, first staging. Up to that takes place at about Mach 3 and 65,000 feet. That's the thickest part of the atmosphere. So you're going through the heavy atmosphere. If you ever stick your hand out the window of a car at 80 miles an hour, it'll just blow your hand back. Well, imagine going Mach 3. So the shuttle is going through load relief the entire time.
Well, and the engines are gimbling too.
The engines are gibbling. All the control surfaces are doing load relief, and we let sounding balloons go up there just to determine the wind shear, and we can't launch if the wind shears are too high.
So a lot of vibration.
A lot of vibration.
And a G loading up to 4.5 or so.
3.5.
3. Okay.
Yeah.
And could you actually read the instruments on the panel, or were you even close enough to read them?
I wasn't at the instrument panel. The right job for the pilots and commanders, the arms folded in front of them, just watching the gauges, because the computer's flying this thing. And there are a couple of emergency procedures where the pilot might take over, but by and large, you let the computers fly it. And the pilot takes over once you're on orbit, and also they generally take over just before you go through Mach 1 on landing, and they take it and land it.
Yeah, I watched a video of, it was a really high number, 110 or something like that. I didn't catch the names, but it was from about an hour before landing. The commander, whoever he was basically talking everybody through it.
Yeah.
And say, this is what's going to happen next, da-da-da. Oh, we got 0.1 G. Again, someone says, oh, I got my feet on the pedals again. That kind of stuff. Yeah.
Now, I remember taking my seat. You do your deorbit burn over like Australia for us, because we were landing at Edwards. About over Hawaii is where they call entry interface, about 400,000 feet. Overhead through the window, you can see this huge swirling sheet of fire, which is the plasma that you're blasting through. A little delta shadow on it. So, oh, tile, don't fail me now.
Delta shadow, what was that?
It's just the shadow of the orbiter. It's the shadow of the orbiter on this huge, swirling sheet of fire that's really underneath you. But then it recombines over the top of you, this swirling sheet of yellow, blue, red fire. The little delta shadow on it, which is our shadow from the really white light down below you.
It was interesting as he was talking how the airspeed started to come up. We're at Mach 25 or we're at 82 knots, that kind of thing. That was really cool.
Oh, it is, yeah. I mean, there's no speed of sound in space, but you get a little patch that says Mach 25. Oh, that reminds me of another story you might enjoy hearing. So the shuttle was built in the LA basin, and then they truck it up to Palmdale where we put it together. And so we got a chance to go see Atlantis while it was still, put together but didn't have the tile on it. So it was kind of a shuttle, but not really. And so we flew in with our T-38s and land, and you just don't walk out on the construction floor, the factory floor there. You go check with the commander and make sure it's cool. Now, we already prearranged it, so of course it was going to be okay to go out there. But Brewster Shaw, the pilot on our flight, the commander on our flight, was the only one who had flown before, so he's got this Mach 25 patch. And so we go into the commander's office, going by his secretary. She just looks at him, and she says, "Oh my God." And she gets on the phone and starts working. We continue on into the commander's office. And about 10 minutes later, her boyfriend shows up. He's an SR-71 pilot. And of course, what's his patch say? Mach 3 plus. Yeah. You know, so it's like two roosters facing off. Mine's bigger than yours, type of thing.
Yeah.
You know? But it was funny as all get out.
Yeah.
So we started off. You asking me what that little target satellite was for?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so in between EVA, no, after the second EVA, what we were going to do is we're going to evaluate a new digital control system for the vernier pilot, for the vernier controls. The shuttle has OMS engines, orbital maneuvering system engines, and an RCS, reaction control system engines. You know.
What's the difference?
Well, OMS are the big ones you use to deorbit. You know, difference when you look at them is the OMS engine's got a cone about yay big. RCS is about this big, and then the little vernier engines are little 5 or 25 pound thrusters. Okay, so they're fairly small, but
25. What are these?
25 pounds. Just well, they burn hypergols.
Hypergol.
Yeah, nitrogen check. Monomethyl hydrogen and nitrogen tetroxide, when you put them together, they explode on contact.
Yeah. Right.
So you just measure the right amount of each into it, and you get a 25 pound thrust. But anyway, this is a new control system for this. And if I had a new control system on an airplane, depending on what it was designed to help me do, track and capture or approach and land, I just go out and do a whole bunch of them at an airport, or have a buddy go be a target for me, and I'll do track and captures or something. On orbit, what are we going to do? And so we came up with a scheme to use, basically the concept, which is based on the corner reflectors for the radar reflectors. You've seen them in the mast of sailboats and stuff. Except this was 80 pounds of aluminum in case we impinged it with the RCS, the reaction control system. Okay, so 80 pounds aluminum ball about this big, and then aluminum sphere, and then we'd use the remote arm, rigidize, and the remote arm has a little camera right on the wrist of it. So we'd rigidize the arm, and then inside on the screen for it, would do an acetate overlay with stars and circles and geometric figures, and then the pilot would actually fly the entire shuttle around this little satellite with both control systems to see which one was more effective, which one was easier to work with, which one used less fuel. And so that's how we did that particular test. But I got to release the satellite for that.
Okay, so let me just see if I got it right. So basically, you released the satellite. Was it spinning or just stationary?
No, just stably.
Okay, and so then you took the shuttle, backed it up a little bit, and then kind of tested reaction around the thing to see.
Right, would fly on the screen geometric, a star, a circle, a square, or whatever you wanted to do around it with one control pilot, one control system, then the second one, and then you're able to compare them.
Who were the pilots?
We had Brewster Shaw was the commander, and then Brian O'Connor. Brewster Shaw was an Air Force lieutenant colonel at the time, and then he made colonel. And then Brian O'Connor was a Marine Corps lieutenant colonel at the time.
And then, so he already named the, what's it, the load specialist you said, and the Mexican.
Rodolfo Nerivale and also Charlie Walker were the payload specialists.
And there was a woman also.
That's Mary Cleve.
And what did she do?
Actually, we made her the flight engineer. Everybody, all the astronauts except Mary were test pilot school graduates. Okay, and so so to keep her challenged, we made her the flight test engineer, and we had to help her a lot at first. But by the time we launched, she was ready to go because Jerry Ross and I got to do the 2 spacewalks and launched the 3 satellites.
So when they put the crew together, were you a 7-member crew the whole time you were together?
We're a 5-member crew, which is the astronaut crew, because the payloads sometimes come and go.
Okay.
And we were lucky that we landed on the one we got and stayed with it. Because at one point they were thinking of flying large format cameras to photograph Lake Chad to see if there's anything we could do to help them in the drought. I'd much rather do an EVA than that, you know, but it wasn't my call.
Yeah, yeah.
But one of the congressmen wanted to do that, so.
So when you're actually okay, now let's talk about inside the spacecraft. I always see that it seems like everybody's kind of hunched up. Well, first of all, talk about when you first get in space, what you told me the other day about not feeling so good.
Well, when you first get to space, I still remember, you know, so it's 8.5 minutes from liftoff to main engine cutoff, MECO. And then you hear this, you know, 3 explosive, you know, ba-ba-bum, and you can actually feel it through your feet on the floor. And that's just the explosive bolts blowing off the external tank, you know, blowing the bolts holding the external tank to you. But you feel that and hear that big time.
Now, the external tank, it actually burns back up.
It does, yeah. It falls into the Indian Ocean and burns up.
Okay.
Maybe something hits the ground, hits the water, but I don't know. But you can watch that thing go away. Right. And now you're on orbit. You have to do another.
Can you see it? Are you upside down this way, or?
Well, we go into orbit, you know, with heads down.
Right.
You don't feel that. You're forced into your seat like it was a normal seat.
How close are you to a window?
I launched on the middeck. and I came home on the flight deck. Mary and Jerry were on the flight deck, and then Jerry switched places with me.
Is that just...
Yeah, just taking turns on who's
cool.
up top, who's down below. So you go to orbit heads down, but that's so when you open the payload bays, they're facing the Earth. The payload bay doors,
right.
The radiators are facing the Earth. That's the right albedo, the right radiance for the radiators to be good. Because otherwise, if they're facing the bright sunshine, they actually collect heat. And if they're facing deep space, they can freeze up. But the Earth is just the right medium to reflect the heat out, out of them.
Right.
So
so how long are you actually in the shadow? I know it's in
every 45 minutes you're in there for 45 minutes. Then
but you're going to see the dawn. Actually, you're going to start picking up a little light. So
right. Well, I mean, yeah. So yeah, sunrises and sunsets. I mean, people ask all the time, "What's your favorite thing to do on orbit or to look at on orbit?" It's the Earth, man. It's gorgeous. You know, every 45 minutes you get somebody's sunrise and somebody's sunset, and they're each gorgeous and beautiful in their own right. You know, usually sunrises don't have too many clouds unless there's a frontal system or something going on. But you just watch, you watch the light come across the land. If you've been in an airplane, you've flown at high altitude, at 30,000 feet, it's beautiful. But at 150 miles up, it's more beautiful because the long red rays kind of go along the curvature of the Earth, and everything gets backlit and highlighted, and then you finally see the little crescent of the sun start to go up there, and then the world lights up, and you can see the different bands in the atmosphere. They have different colors to them. I remember counting 13 different layers of blue, for example.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, it's called Runge scattering. It's just a different dissociation, the big centrifuge of the Earth, the gravity gradient, and I don't know exactly what's in each layer, but I remember Jerry and I trying to count them. I got 23, what'd you get? I got 11. Let's count them again. Finally, we agreed on 13 and stopped counting. Yeah, I'm sure there's an infinite number of them.
Yeah.
But most film only captures a few of them.
Yeah.
But they're just another phenomena.
Now, you trained for that specific job that you had.
Oh, yeah.
Was that as opposed to be one of the pilots or an engineer, or how did that come about?
Well, I was almost a backup pilot anyway because of all the simulator time I had doing sail. But
right.
it's unimaginable. But both the pilot and commander would be hurt, and I'd have to take over or something like that. So if you're a pilot and commander, you train for pilot and commander job.
Right.
As a mission specialist, I trained to all the rest of the systems on the shuttle and the EVAs, the spacewalks, if I had to do them. And then depending on what satellites I've got, some are different than others on how they have to be handled. Some are inertially controlled, some are spin stabilized. Everyone is different.
Did you guys have that? What do you call it? I had initials, MMU, something like that.
Man Maneuvering Unit. No, we did not.
Yeah. And
no, that was only done for a couple of missions, just to proof of concepts. Now in space station, every suit also has gas packs on them. Not a full up MMU, but they have a small gas pack. If I had jumped off the shuttle with all the energy and not tethered, as hard as I could, the shuttle could just fly over and scoop me up in a moment. Okay, that's the rescue that you can use from the shuttle. Space station cannot maneuver, so if I'm working on space station and they're doing usually a couple EVAs a week from the space station, if you come untethered somehow or slip, you don't get to swim or anything like that. If you're not within reach, even if you're an inch away, you can't get there from here. Unless you can throw something the other direction and maybe get a little momentum change or something.
How about the fire extinguisher like they use in that one movie?
Sure, if you're carrying a fire extinguisher, although that's kind of dumb. If you're not shooting through your center of gravity, all you're going to do is start yourself spinning and things like that. Yeah, there's a lot of fallacies in that movie, but yeah it's a fun movie.
Yeah.
But it's just, it's Hollywood. It's not, the physics are kind of wrong in a couple areas of it.
Well, whenever you know anything about anything and you see a movie about it, you just roll your eyes.
Yeah, well The Martian was actually pretty good. Other than the storm, and other than 7 back-to-back miracles to get back up to the orbit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this thing starts off with a storm, which is why he's left behind.
Right.
But there's really no atmosphere on Mars. So if I blow nothing at you at 100 miles an hour, what's it feel like? That was a good gizmo to have them have to do a real quick evacuation, and then that threw the sign into him and stuff like that. But, there's really no storms on Mars. There's no atmosphere.
But when they do have dust storms, though.
They have a little bit, but it's very light. I mean, it's not. That storm was a fallacy. It was a Hollywood thing to set the stage for the rest of it.
Well, now I won't be afraid to go.
There you go. Yeah.
Are we going to go to Mars?
I hope so. I talked to Charlie Bolden. We met him at a reunion not too long ago. And so, Charlie, we going to Mars? He says, well, we don't have the money to go to Mars right now.
Who is he?
Charlie is well, I guess up until a couple weeks ago, he was the director of NASA, NASA administrator.
Okay.
He was also my classmate.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he was in the class of '80 with us. Yeah, he went back into the Marine Corps after that and got, three stars. And he selected as the administrator, did a nice job, really a nice job, in my humble opinion.
Yeah.
But he said, so we basically developed most of the technologies we need to go to Mars. Now we need the money to put them together and do the mission itself. One of the technologies we're still working on, though, is the radiation. In low Earth orbit, I'm pretty much protected by the Earth's magnetosphere. I wore a dosimeter. Everybody in the crew did.
Really?
But I did 11, 12 hours of spacewalks.
Right.
And when I went back, they read the dosimeter and they told me I spent the equivalent of a long weekend at the beach without any suntan lotion on. I'm not sure exactly what that meant, but it just meant I got a lot of radiation.
Yeah.
So a long weekend at the beach almost anybody can handle, unless you go up there and spend a year doing that. And going to Mars right now, probably it's a year out, a year back, and probably 6 months there. All of it without the protection of the Earth's magnetosphere. So yeah, the radiation is an issue. Water is a good shield, but you still have to, we've got to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things they talk about with Orion, a huge tank of water around.
Yeah, that's a lightweight shield that you can also use for fuel and oxygen later on.
Did you experience the light flashes?
No. I've seen San Elmo's fire when we flew in 238 and close to thunderstorms and stuff like that, but not on orbit.
Well, the light, you know what I'm talking about, the light flashes from the
vertical shot from the lightning?
No, from what's the photon particles?
Oh, that in the eyes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, while you're waiting to sleep. Yeah, sometimes I tell that story when I'm talking to kids or not. Yeah, so how do you sleep when you get to orbit? I mean, there's a number of questions. Kids will not let you off without answering. How do you go to the bathroom? How do you eat? And then, how do you sleep? And, so you don't sleep well because you're as excited as a kid in a candy shop the night before Christmas. I've been on orbit doing this and that. What did I do right today? What did I want to do tomorrow? How do I, whatever.
Yeah, right.
Your mind is going crazy trying to get things right. And so, but the rule is, at least with our flight, is you're supposed to sleep when it's sleep time. No staying up all night because you may have to be, just at peak efficiency. So you're laying there with your eye closed trying to sleep, and all of a sudden, it's like a light bulb, a flash bulb goes off in one of your eyes.
Yeah.
And that's basically a cosmic ray hitting your optic nerve. And I remember seeing 2 green, and the rest of them were kind of white. But I remember 7 or 8 of them.
Yeah, I know when the guys came back from the moon, they wore blindfolds, and then they tried to describe what they saw, if they saw the same thing. And sometimes they didn't. But if it gets the thing came right across this way.
But if it hits the optic nerve, it's just like just a synapse. It's like a light bulb goes off, but it's only in one, or flash bulb goes off, and it's only in one eye.
Yeah, it really is odd, isn't it?
Yeah.
So where's it coming from?
The cosmic rays from the sun.
From our sun, or
probably
the Big Bang? Or?
Probably, yeah.
And
most of them are picked up by the magnetosphere, but then we're still within the band of the magnetosphere, and that's why you get the aurora, corona borealis, the northern lights to come in. Those are the high energy particles that are brought into the north and south poles. But every once in a while, one of those radicals just hits you in the eye or hits your optic nerve. I mean, I'm sure they're hitting your whole body occasionally.
Talked about there's an adjustment period when you get into space. In the first place, this is important. This is what Joe Engle said.
Okay.
He said, they show the astronauts having steak and eggs for breakfast. He said, we don't do that.
You can if you want to.
Yeah, but he said
we don't do that.
Yeah, when you get up there, it just doesn't feel right. So what do you really do?
Well, they'll give you any meal you want, just about.
Sure, of course.
But you will have learned on the vomit comet and all the training that because you're going to be provoked a little bit later on, an hour and a half or 3 hours from now. But you want to have something for breakfast. So I just had a standard, toast and not eggs though, because that's something that may or may not set well.
Right.
But when you get to orbit, the first thing you have to do, first of all, everybody's been holding it for about the last hour and a half.
Sure.
Just before you launch, there's a chance to go up one deck. There is a toilet there at the pad. No door, it's been burned off. No toilet seat, it's been burned off. The pipes under the hot and cold water are, colors of the rainbow from all the heat and stuff like that that's been on them. But it's a toilet. But you're still going to be on your back for about an hour and a half prior to liftoff. and then you're going to go and be vibrated like crazy for another, for another 8.5 minutes while laying on your back. So you want to try that, lay on your back. It's, make you pee, make you want to pee real bad.
Right, right.
So about the time you get to orbit, everybody's got to go pee real bad. So other than opening the payload bay doors right away, you got to activate the space station or space shuttle toilet. Mary called it the potty, so I'm trying to remember not to call it the potty for your oral history. Mary was a civil engineer, sanitary engineer, so it's the shuttle potty. So you got to activate the potty. But so other than that, relieving yourself finally, you get your boots and your helmets off because you're floating around. It's amazing when you first get to orbit. Your muscle memory says, when I want to move myself, I have to push off this hard. Well, you do that on orbit, you're just going from one wall to the other really fast and hitting people in the way because everybody's all over the place floating around. And so I remember Mary's first 20 words on orbit were, "Whoa, whoops, excuse me," as she plows into you again, pushing off. And I just pick on Mary because we all were doing that a little bit, but really fast.
But didn't you learn that in the Comet?
Nah, not really. The Comet gives you 30 seconds at a time, 20 seconds at a time, going from 40,000 feet to 20,000 feet.
Right.
And yes, if you pushed off real hard, you'd go zigging, banging into it, but you're in a little capsule and it's,
sure.
You don't learn it. But on orbit, you're there and it's a full-time floating around.
Why do people say on orbit instead of in orbit?
I don't know.
I've noticed other people say it that way too.
You're in an orbit and you're on orbit. It's just the orbit is how fast you are, and that's the orbit you're in. But to me, it's on orbit too. It's a place I went to, and now I'm there.
How far are you there? 250 miles out?
Well, I think we launched into about 120 miles, and then every time you deploy a satellite, you do a burn to increase your altitude to get away from it.
Oh,
if you stay right by the satellite, 45 minutes later, it's going to ignite. It's going to, and we've never had one blow up, but just in case, why do I want to be sitting by something with, a few hundred pounds of, rocket fuel that could blow up?
Right.
So we just do a short, accelerating burn, which actually puts you in a higher orbit, which will slow you down relative to it, so it goes ahead of you. And then, so you're far enough away from it just in case it blows up. But each one adds to our altitude. So we're at about, I think our high point was like 160 miles high, nautical miles high.
I was surprised when I talked with Schweikert when he was talking about the rejoin procedure. And I'm just thinking of an airplane or a car where you just push the gas forward, but all you do is go up higher.
Well, that was one of the other fallacies on the movie Gravity, right? If somebody's in the same orbit as I am, I mean, I usually explain it to high school kids like it's like having a string on a rope. If a rock on a rope, if I'm in low Earth orbit, it's I'm swinging that thing like crazy to keep the thing going. As I put more energy into it, burning the rocket more, it's like letting more string out. So it actually goes around slower. If I let 2,300 miles of string out, it's going to go around once a day. Okay, so each time you add energy, you go further out. The actual stone is going a heck of a lot faster, but orbital velocity-wise, it's not. Angular velocity-wise, it's not. So if I want to catch up with you, and I aim for you and fire my rockets, I'm going to add energy to it, and so I'm actually going around the Earth slower. So you're going to accelerate away from me. Yeah. So what I have to do is actually slow down, turn tail from you, burn away from you, go into a lower orbit. So I'm going around faster. You're going around a little bit slower. Wait till I'm almost past you, then add energy to my orbit, and then you can prox ops. If you're really close, you can aim right for them and burn and catch them. But if you're any distance away, like they did on Gravity, oh, there's the Russian space station, let's shoot for it. That had just gone further separation.
When I was talking to Warden, he was talking about the intersection of orbits, and I never thought about it that way. But when they increase their speed from the 17,000 and change to 25,000, they're still in orbit. Yep. Basically, it's going to be a big orbit.
Bigger orbit, that's right.
But then they went to the point where they intercepted the moon's orbit. And he said he thought it was about 2/3 of the way there. And I said, how fast would you go when you crossed over? He said about 3,000 miles an hour. And then the orbit of the moon, I said, well, how long does it take to orbit? 2 hours. And they're doing 5,000 miles an hour.
Okay.
Yeah, so
orbital velocity for low Earth orbit is 17,500 miles an hour.
Yeah, right. So, but when you go to 25, and then that caused me to think, well, if you do skip off, if they come back and they don't hit the right angle, theoretically it's going to skip off.
That's analogous to throwing a rock at a pond.
Right.
If you just throw a rock in a pond, it'll sink. If you throw it high enough at the right angle, you can make the rock skip, like we all did at the ocean and stuff like that.
Sure.
If you can find a flat rock, roughly the same thing, different media. But if you've got enough velocity and you come into the Earth's atmosphere, it'll be like a rock hitting the Earth, hitting the water at the right angle.
But you're still going to be in an orbit. You're going to skip off. You're not doing 25,000 miles an hour. You might be doing whatever they hit.
True.
So it's going to skip, but it's probably still going to come back around again.
It probably will if you've got enough expendables to last, and it lasts. And
Yeah.
You don't want to get into that problem
No.
trying to figure out how to come home from that one.
Let's not figure that one out.
Yeah, because well, we usually burn up most of our expendables with very little margin left off, to come home.
Right, right.
And you just don't want to get there from here.
Okay, so now when you get up, I mean, that's what Engel said. He said you don't want to eat very much, but when you go into orbit, because you get that little full feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But you mentioned on the phone people having a slight case of the flu for
Most people, it's called space adaptation syndrome. You know where you are, and the shuttle is built like a room or an aircraft. You know up, down, left, and right. So intellectually, you know where you are, but all your organs are floating. So and your liver, your lungs, your heart have sensors within them that kind of know that they're floating. I mean, you feel that thank you, ma'am, whether the elevator goes out from underneath you or you go over the thing in the road, the bump in the road where you float for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, that weird sensation. The sensation part of it goes away from your brain, but your organs are still sensing that. And so, as far as we know, this is the way it happens. It's just the organs are sending messages to the brain. What the heck is going on? Your brain says, "I got this under control," and your organs are saying, "I don't think so." And for some people, the stomach will shut down. We carry Ritalin on board. We carry a stethoscope that if you haven't had a BM in the last 4 or 5 days, we'll listen if there's no bowel sounds. You take Ritalin, which is something developed from chemotherapy. Sometimes that'll cause your stomach to shut down, just to kickstart your stomach again. But everybody is a little bit different. Most folks just feel a little bit of, like a light case of the flu or something like that, but you can still do your job. Some people, if your stomach shuts down, you don't throw up, but you keep swallowing saliva. If your stomach is shut down, at some point you're going to burp, and you're going to burp a stomach full of saliva. And so the best practice is to wear your barf bag in the carnation mode, which means it's already open, zipped up in your pocket, so you don't have time to say, "Ooh, I think I'm going to," bleh. It's too late, It's just, and you're good to go. So that's the best practice, is wear your little barf bag in the carnation mode, and if you don't need it, good for you. But at the end of day 2, just about everybody is feeling wonderful again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the feeling is rather euphoric?
Yeah, rather euphoric. Well, it's like you're almost euphoric when you get over a case of the flu, plus you're on orbit and enjoying it. So, wow. So now instead of, going down the hatch, keeping your, like the onset of seasick, just moving slowly,
Yeah.
I'm going to go down head first. I'm going to go head first with a twist, So you just start feeling good. This is now your environment. Your body just adapts so beautifully to any environment you're in, at least any environment I've been in. And that's true for most of us, that, after that, you're just feeling good.
Is there a difference between the feeling, from the research or studies, between the way it affects women and men, or is it the same?
I think it's the same.
Okay. Yeah.
And even if you're a fighter pilot, done lots of acrobatics and stuff like that, that does not seem to matter a whole bunch.
Yeah.
Comet, and almost anybody can be had in a vomit comet. It's like almost anybody can get seasick in a sailboat if you're not at the tiller and things like that. There's just being in control.
Yeah, I read that there are people that got sick on it and they're not in space, and then just the opposite.
Yeah.
So, but it's not a big deal. So now you get to suit up to go out on your EVA.
Yeah.
Boy, that sounded enthusiastic. What's
Yeah.
that like?
No.
How long does it take to get ready and all that?
The day before, you get your cameras ready because they got to be thermal packed. They got to,
What's that mean? What does that mean?
Well, we took normal cameras, standard cameras up to space with us. But if you want to take them outside, when you were in the direct sunlight, the effective radiant temperature is about 150 Fahrenheit. And when you're in deep space in the shadow, the radiant temperature is about minus 150 Fahrenheit. And, over the short term. So, I mean, just the thermal gradient is just huge. So, you just put this thermal jacket on them that's not only white, it's also insulated to help keep the thermal gradient from messing up your camera. So you got to get all those things.
So does it cycle on and off, the little packet that it's in? Cycle on?
No, it's not energy. It's just like putting an overcoat on the darn thing. And then one of the experiments we did had mylar, gold mylar on the tubes, just again to reflect the heat, as opposed to letting it get cold and hot, because you could actually feel some of the joints tighten up in the heat of the day. So anyway, we got to get all your stuff ready to go, and then you got
joints tighten up in what?
Well, they're metal. They're metal, and depending on the two experiments, one we had these big old beams,
Right.
10 foot long that we put together, but the nodes were on purpose like 5 degrees of slop in them. Now that's not, but I would not want to have to have gotten the thing precision down to a half a degree or so. You just forever using all your forearm strength just to trying to get it perfect. So
when you use your strength though, you're tethered to something or other.
Well, again, this one experiment we did, you weren't. The bottom guy that was handing the big beams up to the other guy, he was tethered. He was in foot restraints, but you'd hand him to the other guy who was free floating. He's tethered, so he's not going floating away. But you'd see holding on with your feet, holding on with one hand. Basically, you're holding on with one hand. I mean, so you weigh 180 pounds or whatever you weigh. The suit weighs another 300 pounds, and the beams weigh 60 pounds apiece. So you're having to do all that torque through your forearms. You don't get to use your back or legs or anything. It's just all in your forearms.
So if you take a beam that's 10 feet long, and if we tried to, well, if you could even hold it up.
Well, in orbit you have no problem with that, but you still have to torque the thing into position to connect it to this node that's going to hold 3 beams on it.
Right.
And it's made out of aluminum, so they could make it beautifully precise or a little bit sloppy. We had to make it, give me at least 5 degrees of slop on the darn thing, or I'll spend all my energies trying to get the first one in.
Tools came from Harbor Freight, or?
No, they were machined out for us.
But were they electric or?
No, just mechanical. You slide it into a little notch and then rotate a cylinder over it on one. The other one you just had to put a twist on it.
I thought they had some sort of wrench that would counteract it.
They have wrenches. It depends on what you're trying to do. And this was more of a time and motion study. Throw a weight in space, connect it to a node, and build the inverted tetrahedron. Then later on, they let us take that whole thing off and manipulate it, put it back down where it came from while standing.
You did it faster and faster every time you did it, too, didn't you?
Yes, we did. The learning curve was really fast.
And so now you're out in space for 6 hours. How long will the suit sustain you out there?
It depends on you. It's like how long will an oxygen tank or an air tank last you if you're scuba diving. Some people are heavy breathers when they get excited.
Yeah.
The batteries are designed to last for about 8 hours. But again, if you're not using your electricity a whole bunch, then it'll last longer.
Was your suit, was it brand new when you put it on?
Yeah.
So is it always that way, or do they reuse the same suits?
Oh, we reuse the same suit, but you can recharge the oxygen, recharge the batteries on them.
And now the suits in the space station, they've probably been up there for years.
Yeah, I'm sure they renew components as they have to, but yeah.
Some story I read that they discovered some mold or fungus on things up there in the space station.
They're discovering lots of things that are caused by human habitation and sweating, dropping water, doing all kinds of stuff, yeah. There's also some calcium deposits that we're starting to pick up on various lenses and things like that, because one of the protocols on orbit so you don't lose bone mass is to drink extra calcium. And some of that calcium then comes out in your sweat and urine and all kinds of stuff like that.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a closed circuit environment. What goes in has to be taken care of somehow. So you asked about the prep though. For us, we had to do a 4 hour, no, we did a 1 hour pre-breathe. They let us have permission to take, the shuttle usually flies at 14.7 psi standard sea level pressure. To do the protocol for going EVA would require a 4 hour pre-breathe. So just hanging on the wall, breathing pure oxygen before you went outside, because you're going to go from 14.7 down to 5 psi in the suit. Or the emergency pressure in the suit, it can go down to 3 psi. Well, 14.7 to 3, that's basically 5 atmospheres of difference for you. That's the bends. So we have to do a pre-breathe to, get rid of the nitrogen in your blood to get rid of that.
So the air you're breathing in the space station is basically 80-20.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
At 14.7.
Right.
We got permission, though, to keep the pre-breathe down, to actually bring the shuttle altitude, down to 10.2 psi with 30% oxygen in it. And that was a big deal, stuff that, now you're talking flammability issues and things like that, but they let us do that, so then our pre-breathe was only 1 hour. What they do for space station, we're just looking for different protocols to make the EVAs more efficient.
Right.
And what we do for space stations, we have them spend the night in the airlock at 100% oxygen, You know, and then the next day when you're ready to go, you just dump that and out they go. I mean, just slowly depress it over time and they're ready to go.
And is that how they're doing it now?
That's how they're doing it on the space station now.
That sounds kind of claustrophobic to be in a little airlock, wouldn't that be? Or
No.
really?
Well, I mean, if you're claustrophobic, you probably don't want to be an astronaut.
Yeah. Okay.
or a caver, you know.
Yeah.
And maybe not a submariner either.
Yeah.
You know, that's just you know, if that's a problem for you, then you know.
But since you're sleeping anyway, I mean,
Right,
when
yeah.
you do sleep, or do you go in a sleeping bag, or
Yes, you go in a sleeping bag, or you know, it's basically just a shell of a sleeping bag.
yeah?
And if it's too cold for you, just wear more clothes. If it's not that cold for you, then you know you go in wearing shorts and a t-shirt or something like that.
I always like the advertisements for bedding materials. It's developed for astronauts, and you go, wait, stop. Why would they need it?
You do have to tie yourself off someplace because,
Yeah.
like any good room, you've got air inlets and air outlets. And if you don't tie yourself off after about 30 minutes, everybody's going to be at the air outlet thrashing around like a can of worms. So
Really?
yeah, you just take your little sleeping bag and tie it to anything you need to on the ceiling, on the wall, you know, wherever you want to be. But you do want to tie yourself off.
And what kind of food did you have?
The first couple days you eat normal food if you want it. Carrot sticks, pretzels, whatever you want. Tortillas, great flying saucers. But at the end of day 3, you know, you catch a tortilla, you get a face full of crumbs. All right, time to put those away. But you know, it's whatever you want. Later on, we go to dehydrated foods or irradiated foods. So they'll freeze dry foods for you, or they'll, you know, if you want a steak for lunch or dinner, then they'll cook it up the way you like your steak. I like it rare, I like it whatever. And then they'll send it off and have it irradiated, which kills all the bacteria in it. And they'll put it in a little aluminum pouch, and it's got a shelf life of, in all honesty, a year or two. They advertise 3 months or so it wants to be relatively fresh before you go to orbit.
So when you, lost my train of thought there. Yeah, I remember Joe Engel said the crackers were the worst because they explode.
They break and give you crumbs all over the place.
And then where does that eventually go?
Filters.
And
Yeah, there's filters. One of the jobs that each of us shared, but I was kind of the in-flight maintenance guy. You know, you go clean the filters,
Right.
and they'll trap all kinds of stuff. I mean, we wore these light blue flight suits.
Right.
Man, it's just the filters were just clogged with blue fuzz. So you just
Really?
take a little vacuum cleaner, scrape it off, just like you would your washing machine.
Yeah.
You know, the lint filter on your washing machine. It's almost the
Yeah.
same thing, except this is blue fuzz with, you know, various other mung in there.
So is everybody working all the time? I mean, when you're not sleeping?
They choreograph you to stay fairly busy, but there's still enough time to be looking out the window. I mean, that's the favorite pastime, just, you know, out watching the Earth roll by. My favorite place was upside down in the commander's chair, okay, which meant I was right side up compared to the Earth, because remember we fly upside down, and just watch the Earth roll at me. That was just, you know, to me that was just the most wonderful sensation, you know, like, this is so gorgeous. It really is. Second favorite was looking out the 2 overhead windows, just because that's looking straight down at it.
Right.
You know, just watching thunderstorms break, because we flew just before Thanksgiving, which is about when the monsoons are breaking in Africa. So you're watching these lightning strikes, air to air, air to ground. Just, you know, it's my own lightning show here going on.
How big does the city have to be before you can see it?
You don't see the city per se as so much as the lights from
Right.
it. But you can, you know, with a pair of 50x binoculars, you can see boats and the Calvin wakes from the bow and stern. I mean, you can see a heck of a lot. You're only 150 miles away.
So, but at night then, pretty much, I mean, would you be able to see something like, well, Las Vegas for sure, you can see that.
Oh, you can see Houston. Again, have you flown at night at 30, 40,000 feet?
Yeah.
It looks almost the same.
Oh, really?
It's just that you're a little bit further away, but it's just like a golden octopus out there, you know, because invariably the roads leading in and out have lights on them. The coast area is lit up like that, too. I remember going a night pass over Florida. It looked like the kid's jigsaw puzzle I had as a kid.
Right.
You know, all the different states. Looked like I could pick up Florida and put it right in the box. Because all the high value property, you know, has got street lights on it, you know, the waterfront, and in orbit they look like they're sodium lights. They got a yellow cast to them.
Huh. Well, so now you said you did a polar orbit. Why would, well, number one, why? Number two, it's not the same every time. You change by 20 or 30 degrees the orbit, don't you?
No. I didn't do a polar orbit. Polar orbits would have launched out of Vandenberg,
Right.
which means you're basically going around the pole instead of trailing the equator.
misunderstood.
Excuse me. We launched due east out of Kennedy Space Center, which put us in a 28.5-degree orbit. That's the latitude at Kennedy Space Center, on the latitude from 0 to 90 at the pole. Yeah, so 28.5 north latitude is where Kennedy Space Center is. So we launched due east from that, and from then on we were in a 28.5-degree orbit relative to the Earth's equator.
Oh, really?
Okay, and now as the Earth rotates, you know, every 93 minutes we come back around. We come back to the same point, but the Earth would have rotated 1,100 miles underneath us. So if you take a strip map of the Earth, you'll just see a whole bunch of, you know, stripes as we're describing our orbit around the various parts of the Earth. From
whenever they see pictures, you always see these different
planes.
That's
it. That's it. That's just us doing our orbit while the Earth rotates under us. And you flatten out the Earth on a strip of map. You know, that's what you'll see is your different strips on it.
So if you the first orbit around, you're at 28.5 degrees, you pass right over Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah. Or Kennedy Space Center.
And then after that, you're going to go.
I'm still at 28.5 degrees, but the Earth is rotated 1,100 miles. So
right.
The next time, whatever 1,100 miles west of Kennedy Space Center is probably out in the Gulf. Another 11, or maybe it's Houston, Texas, or thereabouts.
Yeah.
You know, and so you'll slowly, you know.
But always on the same plane, the same.
You're
line.
always in the same inclination.
Now, you were on the flight deck coming back in.
Right.
And so you're an hour out or so. I'm sure there's numerous checklists to go through. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, you got your whole deorbit checklist that you have to do. You got to restow all those chairs. Everybody get your helmet and boots back on. You know, plug the stairs in. Get all the communications things back up to the chairs, because you know, those are all run along the floor and tied down, so they're not floating around. Stow equipment. I remember I failed to stow one Hasselblad camera. I just stuck it to the Velcro on the wall, and at about 0.3 of a G, it ripped itself off and fell down.
Oops.
Yeah, I don't think it got trashed, but it certainly got hurt a little bit.
Yeah, those were cool.
You know, so you're ready to go. Yeah, they're expensive. Silly me. Yeah, so you do your deorbit burn, and
how long is that? How long is that?
Oh, that's 30-second burn, but it slows you down.
And it doesn't. I've always thought it was going to lie, but it's just very little. It's like a couple hundred knots.
Yeah, just enough delta V, so you no longer have 17,500 miles an hour. Slow down a little bit, and gravity's going to take you home.
And is it about halfway around the world from where you're going to come
It's almost that, yeah. Or Australia to land at Edwards. It's about halfway around.
Yeah.
And so you come in with a series of S-turns. We come in with much more energy than we need, and when we get rid of that energy by doing a series of S-turns, just elongate our glide path coming home.
Right.
At about over Hawaii's entry interface, 400,000 feet. That's just a new phase for the computers.
That the term was, you called that what was it? Interface.
Entry interface.
Entry interface.
And it's just it's a change in the computer programs at 400,000 feet.
Right.
And we know where we are based on the drag. You know, at 1/10 of a G, you'd be up at this high, or whatever it's going to be. It's based on the drag. Even though we got air probes and all kinds of stuff, once you're in that ionization, in that big flaming ionization, you don't have any communications in or out.
When does the ionization start? When does it quit?
Oh, I think it's there all the time, but as we start to enter the Earth's atmosphere and our speed is such, we just start blowing apart the ions of the molecules that are up there, and it's like you're energizing inside a fluorescent light bulb. But just you're putting energy into all those molecules, and they're just fluorescing all around you.
So it starts where and ends where, basically?
I don't know exactly. Yeah, it starts about a little bit before entry interfaces and ends shortly thereafter.
So it's not very long.
It's just a colorful light show.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But you've seen the pictures of Apollo coming in. They had that ablative nose cone. We have the tile. The tile won't take anywhere near with the ablative nose cone on the Shuttlewood. They have the heat shield on them.
Really?
Our tile is designed to take about 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, and they were 3,000 and 4,000.
And those things they were seeing like 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
But it's different trajectories, different technologies that we're working with. Our nose cone on ours, and along with the carbon leading edge, that'll take 3,000 to 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Are the windows open because the guys see out?
Oh yeah, you see the whole time. Yeah, there's a little paper cover on the RCS jets, but that's just to keep the rain and stuff out of them. That blows off. First time you use them.
So you're coming down. So now we were talking about before. You get the slow G build up.
Right.
And then that's with the S-turns, and it's all computer.
It's all computer. Then all the pilots, ever since we landed at White Sands Missile Range, I think it was STS-3, where we let the computer do an auto land, and it flared up too high and the nose slapped down. Didn't do any real damage, but it was right at the margin. From then on, the pilots said, all right, we're flying this thing manually. So before you go subsonic, then the pilots take over. And that's when Brewster started talking to us. Okay, the next thing you're going to feel is we're going to go transonic now, and you'll feel some vibration for the first time since we had MECO, the main engine cutoff, a week ago. So you'll feel some vibrations as we go through the speed of sound. And then he just flew around the hack, the heading alignment cylinder, to go around Edwards runway 22 to land on the 15,000 foot runway at Edwards. We did not land on the lake bed. We landed on the hard. But you could have landed on the lake bed.
Yeah, I was up at, I race old vintage cars, and I was up at Fontana when I heard the boom come in one time.
Ba-boom, yeah.
And everybody was, what was that? I said, it was a space shuttle. And because I knew it was coming in. I said, that was a shuttle. How cool,
It is.
Guess we both boomed a lot of towns ourselves over the days. Of course, you never can tell. I remember flying on a Sunday one time in a test hop with a guy. And, and all of a sudden he's going Mach 1 and, Mach 3 or something like that. And I said, what are you doing anyway? He said, man, if those bastards make me fly on Sunday, I'm going to boom the base.
All right. And somebody had to pay for all the bric-a-brac. Well, a T-38, you could, if you weren't paying attention, it'd be easy to not pull your throttles back when you're descending and slide right into Mach 1.
Yeah. So I know you. So you were in position. You were sitting in seat number 5. I think I saw the map. So you're kind of on the left-hand side of the cockpit, and the third row sort of would be about.
Well, there's only 2 rows. You got the pilot commander,
right?
And then see, I was on the right-hand side behind. Yeah, Mary was beside me on my left. And there's really not that much to do unless you have an emergency, and happily we didn't have one. So we just landed. And then throw the switches, and then comes physically the hardest part of the mission, was to get your butt out of the seat.
And why is that hard?
Well, it's you have told your brain, how much energy to use to do different things, and your brain is going to do the right thing. So I remember Mary's beside me. Hey, Mary, stand up, and she tries, and she can't. You can't stand up. You can't either, and you can't. I mean, just holy cow! I can't believe I can't stand up. And you just try harder, and then you try harder, and pretty soon you get up. Your sense of balance is a little bit screwed up, but as soon as you realize how much muscle to use, then you're good. Then you got to climb down the the ladder, getting down to the lower deck. And the best practice is to hold on to the handrails as you're going down, because your sense of balance is a little bit weird. They pick you up in a bus, take you back to, in our case, because we landed at Edwards, right up to the NASA Center, do a quick physical. They do that drunk walk where one toe in front of the other and walk.
Really?
Your arms are flailing like crazy.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, and then they do the stair step, where you're stepping up a foot and down a foot. And your blood pressure is spiking and crashing, spiking and crashing. But that's just how fast, and they want to see how fast you recover from being on orbit.
Right.
And again, everybody recovers pretty well. If you've been up there for a year, though, your muscle atrophy is pretty big.
So have you talked to anybody?
So I was in Korea, and somebody mentioned...
Flying there?
Oh yeah, not as much. I was on staff at the time.
And you would have been a major?
I was a major operations officer, but for a Chinook unit that also had Hueys and Scouts. So, I get to fly 2-3 times a month, but it wasn't like being a full-time pilot there.
So of the helicopters you flew the Chinook, the Huey, what was the other one?
Oh, Cobras.
Really?
Oh yeah. I mean, just as a test pilot, you fly just about everything the Army has.
And flying a Cobra, is that about the coolest of all the helicopters to fly?
It's one of the coolest, yeah. Especially at Edwards where it's so hot. Got an air conditioner that blows nice cool air in the back of your seat and up through your pants.
Oh yeah?
Oh yeah. Mesh seat. Yeah, you're not supposed to have it turned on for takeoff and landing because you might need the power for something else. But other than that, as soon as you get airborne.
How fast does that thing go?
Straight and level, it's about 140 miles an hour. In a dive, it'd go up to 180, I think it is.
And the pilot's in the back seat. And the gunner, whatever.
That's right. The pilot or the co-pilot, instructor, whatever you want.
And then the other person would be mostly an enlisted guy with that helmet that you can aim the gun.
It could be, or usually a warrant officer.
Okay.
When I flew it in Vietnam with some friends, I was in the front seat then because that wasn't my prime aircraft.
Oh, okay.
But I got to snivel a couple of combat rides in that thing.
And did you get to shoot the gun with the
Oh yeah.
with the cool helmet?
Yeah, in this particular one, we had the folding, the 2.75-inch folding
Right.
folding fin rockets
Right.
from the pod. The pilot controlled those, but I had the chunker and the minigun in front. That the chunker is that shoots the little hand grenade out there.
Mm-hmm.
I forget the 45 millimeter or whatever the heck it is, but chunk and the minigun. So we were part of a scout team, so you'd be up there at 3,000 or 4,000 feet. And the guys are down there in the little scout aircraft, just looking for Vietnamese or VC. And if they find them, they'd be, they're shooting at them, throw rocks at them, whatever they had to do. If they shoot back, then they'd pop smoke and get out of there. And then we'd just roll in on it, and just shooting chunker and minigun and rockets going. Holy cow! What a trip! But oh yeah.
No, we have a Cobra in our museum.
You sure do.
And it has a minigun, and it also has a rocket. But
Right, that's a later configuration. The Vietnam vintage just had the chunker and the minigun in front. And
does it have the chunker that you're talking about? Does it have one of those?
I think it is. No, I think you don't have the chunker. What you've got is a little minigun up front.
Yeah.
And then you've got two different types of rockets. It looks like you've got an inner pod with some 2.75 folding fins.
Right.
And then it looks like it could be a Hellfire missile or something like that.
Ooh, serious.
So that'd be a much more recent Cobra than the ones I flew.
So the Hellfire missile, that's one where they use a laser spotting for those things, don't they?
They use laser spotting, yeah.
And then how did you actually do that yourself?
No, I didn't. I haven't shot the Hellfire.
I just wonder how you'd have to have two helicopters, I guess, or
No.
some way to light up the target.
Well, a guy on the ground can light it up if it's a laser illuminated,
Right.
or
right.
you could illuminate it yourself, depending what you need.
Yeah. It's been up there for a year?
No,
Yeah.
but I have talked to folks who've been up there for 6-8 months. The Russians always carry people off in a stretcher,
Really?
just to save them the embarrassment. We always have a doc go on board the shuttle
Yeah.
before anybody comes out, just in case somebody's had an issue.
Yeah. So what was it like? How long did it take you to recover? To where you were just back to normal?
I'm basically the next day.
Really?
Yeah, I think I jogged later on the evening of the next day I was home.
But you told me about laying in bed when your daughter came in to see you.
Yeah, well, I mean, all right, so we landed at Edwards, did a quick physical, gave us a beer, put us on the shuttle training aircraft, and flew us back home. So that's like a 3-hour flight or something like that. Landed at Ellington, they picked us up in a bus, drove us home, because they didn't want you driving, against your sense of perception. Everybody's a little bit different. I probably could have driven safely, but just in case. And I went home to bed in my own bed, about 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night. And the next morning, I hadn't seen my daughter in about a month or more, because again, they do isolation from the kids, just so you don't get any diseases they might be carrying. And she comes in at the end of the bedroom and says, "Daddy," she hadn't seen me in a month, and she just runs and just jumps. And I just knew she was going to hit the ceiling with that much energy in the she was just right, landed right on me. "Oh, hi, honey. Oh, so good to see you again," stuff like that. And I remember the phone rang, and I wanted to float over and get it. That doesn't work either. I mean, you learn real quick. Oh yeah, I'm not on orbit anymore. Remember driving into work pretty quickly after that. "Show me pictures. Tell me this isn't just a dream." I actually went. "Yeah, you went, Woody. It was a good flight." "All right." Yeah. No, it was fun. Wonderful.
So how were you involved with when there was obviously a debrief of some sort or another?
Oh yeah.
So after you come back, debriefing, and then were you still involved with anything involved with that particular crew for any period of time?
Well, they're really good friends, and will be forever. For as
Sure,
long as where forever is for me. But no, you're right. You're off doing different things pretty quickly after you land. The last formal thing is there's a press debrief where you show them videos from what you did on orbit. We put something together. I modified that slightly, added extra EVA that's still a movie that I use when I'm showing to elementary school and things like that. You have to write a post-flight report,
Right.
talk about the experiments, the different things you did. It's a 1/4 inch thick or so, maybe a 1/2 inch thick of double spaced, and that's your official flight report. So I was in Korea, and somebody mentioned.
Flying there?
Oh yeah, not as much. I was on staff at the
And
time.
you would have been a major?
I was a major operations officer, but for a Chinook unit that also had Hueys and Scouts. So, I get to fly 2-3 times a month, but it wasn't like being a full-time pilot there.
So of the helicopters you flew the Chinook, the Huey, What was the other one?
Oh, Cobras.
Oh, really?
You know, oh, yeah. I mean, just as a test pilot, you fly just about everything the Army has.
And flying a Cobra, is that about the coolest of all the helicopters to
It's
fly?
one of the coolest, yeah. Especially at Edwards where it's so hot. Got an air conditioner that blows nice cool air in the back of your seat and up through your pants.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah. Mesh seat. Yeah, you're not supposed to have it turned on for takeoff and landing because you might need the power for something else. But other than that, as soon as you get airborne.
How fast does that thing go?
Straight and level, it's about 140 miles an hour.
Not bad.
In a dive, it'd go up to 180, I think it is.
And the pilot's in the back seat, and the gunner, whatever.
That's right. The pilot or the co-pilot, instructor, whatever you want.
And then the other person would be mostly an enlisted guy with that helmet that you can aim the gun.
It could be, or usually a warrant officer.
Okay.
When I flew it in Vietnam with some friends, I was in the front seat then because that wasn't my prime aircraft.
Oh, okay.
But I got to snivel a couple of combat rides in that thing.
And did you get to shoot the gun with the
yeah.
with the cool helmet?
Yeah, in this particular one, we had the folding, the 2.75 inch folding
Right.
Folding fin rockets
Right.
from the pod. The pilot controlled those, but I had the chunker and the minigun in front. That the chunker that shoots the little hand grenade out there.
Mm-hmm.
I forget the 45 millimeter, whatever the heck it is, but chunk, and the minigun. So we were part of a scout team, so you'd be up there at 3,000 or 4,000 feet, and the guys are down there in the little scout aircraft, just looking for Vietnamese or VC, and if they find them, they'd be they're shooting at them, throw rocks at them, whatever they had to do. If they shoot back, then they'd pop smoke and get out of there. And then we'd just roll in on it, and just shooting chunker and minigun and rockets going. Holy cow! What a trip! But oh yeah.
No, we have a Cobra in our museum.
You sure do.
And it has a minigun, and it also has a rocket. But
Right, that's a later configuration. The Vietnam vintage just had the chunker and the minigun in front. And
does it have that? The chunker that you're talking about, does it have one of those?
I think it is. No, I think you don't have the chunker. What you've got is a little minigun up front.
Yeah.
And then you've got two different types of rockets. It looks like you've got an inner pod with some 2.75 folding fins.
Right.
And then it looks like it could be a Hellfire missile or something like that.
Ooh, serious.
So that'd be a much more recent Cobra than the ones I flew.
So the Hellfire missile, that's one where they use a laser spotting for those things, don't they?
They use laser spotting, yeah.
And then how did you actually do that yourself?
No, I didn't. I haven't shot the Hellfire.
I just wonder how you'd have to have two helicopters, I guess, or
No.
some way to light up the target.
Well, a guy on the ground can light it up if it's a laser illuminated,
Right.
or
right.
you could illuminate it yourself, depending what you need.
Yeah.
Army wanted to re-green me, is what they do. Remember, you're in the Army, so I got to spend a year in Korea. And I was in Korea, but I applied for the astronaut program in '78,
Mm-hmm.
which is when they first opened it up to the astronaut for the shuttle program.
Now they had, as I recall, they had the first class, the second class, the third class.
Right, I was the second class. First class was for class of '78.
Okay.
And they picked up 35 folks, including there's 4 women. And then I was the class of '80, which is the one after that. So
Right.
the first Army guy, Army, no kidding, Army, not we've had other West Pointers go before, but this is the first Army guy who was in the class of '78.
Well, a lot of the West Pointers would have been guys who were early on when they didn't have
yeah, Frank Borman, Ed White, we had a bunch of them.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, Buzz Aldrin, there were a lot of West Pointers, but none
Bill
Army.
Anders. Bill Anders.
I'm actually the first Army West Pointer.
Real Army.
Yeah, actual Army and actual West Point. West Point that stayed in the Army instead of went Air Force.
So the astronaut class you got into, does it have a designation?
Yeah, it was class of 1980.
Okay.
Yeah, so we didn't. Yeah.
How many people are in it?
19.
And then what do you study?
Well, when you first become an astronaut, for the first year you're an astronaut candidate. That just means if for some reason you don't work out, NASA can say thank you very much, but would like to go ahead and proceed without your company. It hasn't happened that I know of, but it could. So the first year you're kind of on probation, and you're given a job, a full-time job part-time job that you do along with learning the shuttle. So you start off on the shuttle training. You start off on a single.
Involved in that. John Ball was his name.
I know John. I met John.
Is that right?
Yeah, way back when. Yeah, he was. I think he was one of the pilots on it.
I think so. Yeah, he was from Connecticut or somewhere, I believe. He's
Yeah.
up the Northeast.
Yeah, they'd fly him with that thing, and would be scheduled for that hop, and you'd go. I think with.
Yeah,
Yeah,
John
so-
was We were in the 10th TAC Fighter Squadron and the 8th TAC Fighter Squadron together.
Okay. The whole test pilot school thing was just, fascinating. And the folks you're meeting, I remember, the first couple of days there, you're just, so where are you from? What did you do? And stuff like that. And one of the guys sitting over in the corner, so how many hours you got? What did you fly? I flew, I think it was the F4. How many hours you got? I only got 400 hours. What are you doing here? You need 1,100 hours. He says, well, I'm an Israeli pilot, and it was all afterburner time. In my photography, during the Arab-Israeli war, and my hobby is photography. I'm a 17-time ace or whatever the hell it is. He says, never mind. Sorry about the questions. Just telling the war stories. Just so much fun.
You were in test pilot school, and
then 4 years as a test pilot at Edwards Air Force Base. The Army used to have its engineering flight test facility at Edwards.
Okay, so what years would that be?
That would be from about 74 through 80 is when I was there.
Okay. And did you live you lived at the base?
I lived on base.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was there twice, really. Once for 6 months to finish up all the time I needed in fixed wing.
Right.
Then a year at PAX, and right back to Edwards to my 4-year utilization tour.
So then how did you get into the astronaut program?
Well, after 4 years as a test pilot, it was time to find another job.
And so how did you become a test pilot?
Well, I applied for it and got picked up for the program, and then I got a master's in aerospace engineering to go to Patuxent River, which is where the Army does its test pilot training. You have to be fixed wing qualified too. So then I had to go to the fixed wing transition, which is where I then got fixed wing and fly different things, and I had to get up to, I think it's 400 hours of fixed wing time. You needed 1,100 hours total, but at least 400 hours in whatever your lesser aircraft was, helicopter or fixed wing.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a chance to just keep flying fixed wing all over the place, and finally I had enough hours to go to PAX.
And what kind of airplanes were you flying there?
At PAX River or at the test pilot?
Yeah.
PAX
River first, and then test pilot school.
Okay. Well, PAX is the test pilot school.
Oh, okay.
I went to Edwards to get most of my flight time. So I was flying the Mohawk, the OV-1. That's a triple tail twin Huey engines. So twin 1,100 power turboshaft engines.
Mm-hmm.
Really a nice performing aircraft. The T-28 we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Big old 2,800 horsepower radial engine, 2-stage turbocharger. Oh, hurt me. I mean, just what a fun thing to do is get lots of time in that thing. At PAX River, you fly a little bit of everything. So I was flying the T-2 Buckeye, which is a training aircraft. They had the Mohawk. They had B-24 Liberator, or B-26 rather, variable stability aircraft. Lots of different. They had one that was specially designed to let them make it fly like a fighter or like a bomber, not for long. Because if it's not a fighter, it's still a light bomber.
That was a computer program.
It was a computer program that changes how fast the responses went.
Yeah,
and after they crashed, when they had to go to a pure jet to do that training.
Yeah, a friend of mine was in.
They had to allow me to go there. I applied to Annapolis as well as West Point, and Annapolis gave me an alternate, and West Point gave me a position. So I took the bird in hand.
When did you graduate from West Point?
1967.
And so after that, what did you do?
Well, that was the peak of the Vietnam War, so I had a month's vacation, then airborne school, ranger school, basic course, advanced course, then right over to Vietnam for my first tour.
Where were you stationed?
I was up in the I Corps area with the 101st Airborne Division, up in the Wei Phu Bai area, mostly on fire bases.
Okay. And then you came home, and then after that, you...
Well, while I was over there on that particular tour, I applied for flight school, took the physical while I was in Vietnam, so I passed it. Came back to flight school, and it was just almost another year of flight school. Basic training, and then advanced helicopter, and then I was high in the class, so I got Chinooks, which is the one we're still flying, the big old tandem rotor cargo aircraft. Special Forces uses it too. And
now, was it just regular pilot training now? Is it Air Force pilot training?
No, it's a helicopter training very specifically.
By the Army?
By the Army.
Okay.
Now the Army does helicopter training for the Air Force and the Army, but back then, maybe we did back then too. I think the Air Force had their own schools.
So I saw the model of the T-38 upstairs. Where did you fly that?
Later on, after my second tour in Vietnam, I really wanted to stay a pilot, which is difficult in the Army because we have flying warrant officers. So to stay a pilot, I needed to become a test pilot, which is really the only viable way to stay a pilot in the Army.
My name is Ron Carrico. I'm with the San Diego Air and Space Museum, and today we're with Woody Spring. Is astronaut to start off with, and more specifically a mission specialist on a TS, which stands for Space Transport System.
Transportation system.
Transportation System, 61B.
Right.
And well, let's talk a little bit about how you got there, and then what you did, and the gee whiz fun stuff of it.
Sure.
So first of all, where were you born?
I was born in Hartford, Connecticut, raised in Rhode Island. So I was from a small town USA, New England style. My folks had it was school for emotionally disturbed, mentally retarded kids. It was basically an old farm, an old homestead. In fact, we had a 3-story hand-pegged chestnut barn that's now in a museum.
Oh, yeah.
The place was gorgeous. You know, back in the old days, you can see the earthen dams where they had the undershoots, water mills, and stuff like that for it. It's a gorgeous little area. It's the land that time forgot.
Yeah.
And so that's where I kind of grew up. You know, in the sticks of Rhode Island. And although I love the area, West Point was my escape. I just knew I wanted to paint my life on a little bit bigger landscape than I had available in Podunk, Rhode Island.
So you picked West Point as opposed to the Naval or Air Force Academy, but you wanted to be a pilot all along, is that correct?
Pretty much. I picked the one that selected me, that